Hello, hi, we're here at the Greenville Public Library. We have Renée Finlay here, who is our current, artist in residence.
Okay, yeah.
Showing work at the library. So we're gonna do a little interview. So Renée is an interdisciplinary artist who lives in Smithfield, who is currently and has previously shown work at the library. So Renée, do you want to give a little introduction? Tell us about yourself and your work and the work you're displaying at the library.
Well, I taught at Bellingham High School in Massachusetts for 40 years, and it was a very general art program. There were some specific things, but they mainly wanted me as a ceramic teacher, and my background was not really ceramics, so I had to hurry up and get some mastery in ceramics because I thought the kids knew more than I did. So my master's degree is in ceramics, and when you pursue a degree in art education, you get a little bit of everything. You get a little bit of weaving. You're required to take things outside your major focus, and my major focus was painting, drawing and painting. So I pursued ceramics. I had to take photography, printmaking, sculpture, design. So that's where I felt at the point in my life where, I was a master. I forget what that saying is. A master.
A jack of
all trades.
Yeah,
I always felt I was the jack of all trades, master of nothing. And so when I did begin my master's degree, it was just for ceramics.
Yes. Okay.
And then as I was going through my undergraduate program, I found a love in anthropology. And whenever we had a paper to do, I would always relate it back to art. And so I sort of followed that theme when I did my master's, and so I studied the Pueblo Native American community because I just love the work of Maria Martinez. And instead of using a kiln, their work is fired in a pit, and the smoke is what goes into the pores of the clay and decorates the clay. And so all my thesis and the body of work that I had to produce, all the pottery, was all fired in a pit. And so I followed that theme in my career. And then because we were working under the mandates of the Massachusetts state frameworks, we had to make sure we were doing integrated kinds of lesson plans. So I would interact with some of the other faculty from the different departments. So that also informed my work that I'm doing now. And so the English teacher would approach me, what can we do with our students? The music teacher, the language teacher, that was always an easy one because it was always, with French, it was the Impressionists.
Right, yeah.
So that was a wonderful collaborative kind of an approach that I still kind of follow today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that totally shows in all of your work. So, and I found it so interesting when I was, researching you, how you had that ceramics background, and I said, well, how do we get here? so that really answers that in a lot of ways. So we kind of talked about like having an interdisciplinary background in general, but I guess something I was curious about in this particular body of work that you're showing at the library right now is what led you back to pastels as a medium after all that? So that was something I think you said that you had experimented with as a child and then returned back to for this body of work.
Yeah, for some reason drawing came easy to me.
Yeah.
But I think what started it was I came from Woonsocket, and my grandmother lived in the house next door, and I had aunts that were teenagers. And one of my aunts was taking painting lessons, and all her paintings were in the living room. And that was my first, I think, memory of how art was exposed to me. And then when I got into elementary school, it was kind of obvious that I could draw well,
Right.
and I enjoyed doing it. So I took lessons at the Woonsocket YWCA, and the first art material that we were exposed to was pastels. And I just loved them because they were different. I noticed right away from colored chalks. They were brighter, they were like jewels. And so I really, really loved them.
Right.
And then I graduated to oil paintings. So I had not done pastels since I was a child. Dabbled a little bit in high school, and then definitely taught it at Bellingham High School. And I felt, this whole dabbling in all these other areas, I did want to go back and really focus on the pastels at this stage of my life, and that's what's happened. So I signed, after I retired, I signed up for a workshop, a weekly workshop with the pastelist up in Sudbury, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
And her name is Jean Rosier Smith, and she's an internationally known pastelist today.
Oh,
She's in
that's
Pastel Journal and in American Art. And then Jean Tagney is a wonderful Newport artist, and I've taken workshops with her at the Wickford Art Association. And then when you look at Pastel Journal, you can see where there's these many, many workshops available with other famous pastelists. And so there are many on the Cape, and I'm a member of the Pastel Society in Cape Cod.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's really motivating. I love just grabbing a box and having my colors there. I don't have to deal with turpentine
Right.
and cleaning brushes
Yeah.
afterward. But I've learned so much about pastels, but it's also reinforced my knowledge of doing art in general, the
Yeah.
making of art, and getting back to the rules of perspective, color theory, composition, and so being an art teacher and having a family, you come home tired, but what was nice in Massachusetts, I had to take graduate credits every so often to maintain my certification. So I did make sure that I took them in the pastels.
In the pastel medium, yeah, because that's something that I think is so amazing about your work is how it showcases, the trajectory of your work showcases that you never stopped learning yourself, and
Right.
that is something I feel like not, that's such a special thing in an artist. So,
Well, I did that because of my sons. They're adults now, and I didn't want them to think that I sit home and watch TV all day. So I have the evidence to show now, and I think they're glad that I'm still pursuing my art.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a special thing. Well, speaking of your family, I guess I have some questions. You work so much collaboratively, which is something we were talking about in the Portrait of My Mother series that you showed at the library before. That was a huge collaborative effort, with your nephew and alongside your family, truly. Yeah. And even you teach alongside your niece. So I was curious. So many people I think of practices like drawing and painting as like solitary ones, but you've really broadened that scope. So can you talk a little bit about that and why you work that way?
It's interesting that you recognize that. My cousin Paul Cody, his father recently passed away.
Okay.
My uncle from Alzheimer's, and he is such a big advocate of supporting the Alzheimer's Association, Dr. Salloway's study at Butler Hospital, and he's very much involved with putting on fundraisers for the benefit of the Alzheimer's Association. And he's not an artist by training, but he does these wonderful abstract studies, and he sells them, and he does not keep a penny of what he gets for
Oh,
them.
wow. Okay.
And the money goes right to the Alzheimer's Association. And I just had a moment one day where I said, my goodness, if my cousin Paul can do this, well, here I am, an art teacher, I should be doing the same thing.
Wow, yeah.
So to advocate for Alzheimer's, to let people know that there are other people dealing with it, I
Right.
think is important.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people have reached out to me and they'll say, you know, I'm looking at your exhibit and it's moving.
Yeah.
And my parent or my aunt or a neighbor has Alzheimer's, and so it's to bring comfort, but also I think to validate that this person you're losing was a loved human being. You
Right.
still care about them. So this project was more an homage to my mom and her family of siblings,
Right.
and to take whatever gift I was born with
Yes. Yep.
and to do something for their benefit on their behalf.
Right. That's so amazing. Yeah. And it's such a powerful thing, to have people reach out and how that resonates with them who are going through a similar tragedy. Let me see. What we have here. Can you talk a little bit about the work in that series? For those who haven't seen it, maybe.
Well, in my mother's family, there were 6 siblings, and they, except for one of my aunt Louise passed away from an asthma attack when she was in her 30s.
Oh wow! Oh my gosh.
All the other siblings have succumbed to Alzheimer's.
Wow. Okay.
And so I felt it was a genetic trait, and there were 6 siblings in that family. So even though my Aunt Louise passed away at a young age, she probably would have had Alzheimer's. So I wanted to do something with that understanding of it's a family disease. I think it's a genetic thing. So many people are involved with it, have been touched by it.
Right. Yeah.
It's amazing how many people you learn who are dealing with a loved one who has Alzheimer's. So that was kind of the genesis for my body of work. And because of my work in clay, I felt that the pastels were it's like colored clay too,
Right.
compressed. It's the same thing.
It's
So I thought there would be a tie there, a relationship. And so going back to my series, I lined up with my niece and my nephew who have music degrees, and I have a son who has a music degree also. And so we have this awful disease, but we also have some good things.
Right.
And this thread of art and music does run through my family.
Absolutely.
With my aunts, some of my cousins, my own children. And so I wanted to do something that we could line up art and music, and I wanted people to really be pulled in by an enlarged microbial entity.
Mm-hmm.
And these are microscopic things. So I did a lot of research. I reacquainted myself with all the terms of the brain cells, the dendrites and whatever, and also did some research in Alzheimer's. So there was a lot of background work, and then I decided to base my work on Georgia O'Keeffe's, when she was out in the desert, where she took like a flower and she enlarged it and then cropped it. So I did the same thing as her. And I do a lot of landscapes. Nature's an important part of me, so I knew that I wanted to make a correlation of the landscape of the mind, so to speak, and these cells which are destroying our brain are still living entities. And so I used the brain cell motif, and I enlarged it and I cropped it, and then when I put the pastel to paper, I wanted to do it in the same manner as an artist approaches a landscape. So you're working with atmosphere, you're working with space. Things up front are dark, things far away are light. Things up front are bright, things far away are dull. And then there's that warm and the cool whole thing with the atmosphere and the shadows. And the soft edges as opposed to hard edges when things are far away, you don't see them that clearly.
Yeah.
And as I was working on sort of editing these images right from the internet,
Right, yeah.
in which I was afraid the copyright police were going to come after me. So I started to come up with my own forms, which was very easy to do because right away you can see where the structure of a brain cell looks like tree limbs.
Right.
And looks like cracks in the roads or arteries in our bodies. So that was another kind of a pivotal thing for me is, wow, it was a wow moment. I did not know that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I started to think of these cells as beautiful, undulating forms. They're dancing around in our head. It's an own ecosystem, and I wanted to enlarge it. And so I took the microbial world and made it as a landscape.
As a landscape. That's so interesting. And it actually, one of my next questions was about, the evolution of your art practice in that way and how, you worked a lot in landscapes and then, have transferred and kind of, jumped to more abstract forms and stuff like that. But it sounds like, there's so many similarities
There are,
in those anyways. So that is so, I love that. So let's see. So I guess I'm going to jump a little bit to your work in Smithfield, and I'm thinking a lot about actually in your work on the Conservation Commission and how I guess I'm just curious how that, does this work that you do have a strong connection to, the landscapes that you're working in?
Definitely.
And painting?
Yeah. I was born in Woonsocket,
Okay.
but then we moved to Cumberland when I was in first grade. And when we moved to Cumberland, there were a lot of farms, wasn't a lot of development. And we lived on a dead-end street. So across the street were woods, and all around our house were fields. And I don't know if you know anything about Mendon Road in Cumberland. It was I lived right across from Dunkin' Donuts and where Benny's used to be in Cumberland, in a plat there. And you could walk down to the Blackstone River, down towards Manville.
Okay, yeah.
So I had the world. The world was my backyard.
Yeah.
And because I was the oldest of 8, my mom was kind of busy, and I don't think she really knew where I was at. So I would be all over the place, all by myself, and I knew where the chestnut tree was, and when the chestnuts came out, when you could harvest them, and I knew when the lady slippers were going to come out in a certain area. I walked on stone walls all the time, and I was curious. I think it was a curiosity of a child that got me going, and I wanted to see what was under rocks. And then there was a spring in the field, a bubbling underground spring, and there was an apple tree there. And instinctively, I always knew when that would blossom, and when the water would bubble up from the ground, and you'd see the skunk cabbage. And I just thought that bright green in the dull winter was amazing. So I almost knew the life cycle without realizing that it was science, I guess. And I always knew it must have been a farm where a house was built, because there was a blueberry patch. And instinctively, again, I always knew, the blueberries must be coming out, and get a bucket and go pick some.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So it's so funny because when I was looking at your work, I'm born and raised New Englander, so I said there's so many connections to New England landscape in this work. And so one of my questions actually was, did you grow up in New England? And if so, that is totally, I guess as a more general question, how do you think that an artist's home plays into their practice? Like, as far as, those influences seem to infiltrate your work always.
That's an interesting question, because I'm trying to figure out how to answer it, but my goodness, if I was born in New York City,
Right.
which I had a friend in college, a roommate, and she was from New York, and how would that affect my life? It would have, definitely. I think it was my spirit that informed my work. That I guess, if you want to talk spiritually, I always felt that the outdoors was my church.
Right, yeah. No, I love that. It makes so much sense. I think it shows in your work. Absolutely. Let's see. I guess, we talked a little bit about your background in ceramics, but how does that, to know so many different mediums and to work within so many different mediums, and it seems like teaching has informed that a lot and led you to those places in a lot of times. Even with the A Portrait of My Mother series, I was thinking that a lot of those works, and you're talking about Georgia O'Keeffe and everything like that, and how that kind of mirrors a lot of those projects that you were doing with students, even based on different artists and history. Do you have so I guess I'm curious, how that specific background in ceramics has informed that. You talked a little bit about the natural patterns in your ceramics work. How does that relate to your other paintings and pastels?
When I was doing my degree, we had to take ceramics. I took ceramics 1 and ceramics 2, and one of the pivotal books that one of my professors introduced us to was Finding Your Way with Clay, and it was all hand building. And so I had mastered the wheel, and of course you learn the pinch pot and the slab pot and the coil pot. And I think clay kind of was a good fit, because again, it went back to my childhood.
Right.
Because when you're out in nature, you're playing with mud all the time. I don't know if you did.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of mud.
A lot of mud in a New England childhood.
Taking a stick and drawing with it, making a mess, throwing it at people, other kids, siblings, I guess. But
I know 1 of 8, so
so I think because it came from the earth, and I think as artists, our sensibilities are really tuned into the earth, to nature anyway.
Absolutely.
And so it was more or less touching the earth up close. And it was basically mud, and that's what the pastels are. They are pure pigments, right from the earth, and these vibrant colors. And I think that's the affinity, because, and then I think we were taking stones all the time and trying to scratch into cement and scratch into the road to draw with it.
With whatever was available.
Which the cavemen did too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Well, I guess I have a couple kind of closing questions. I was curious if you had a piece of advice that you would give to any young artists, or young artists maybe even looking to pursue more than one medium in the way that you have.
Yeah, I would say definitely to always explore everything and experiment with your materials. And to try to loosen up and let the material speak to you, I guess, instead of, oh my goodness, I've got to paint just like Michelangelo, and you don't have to. And I think that came out of teaching, because I would have these kids come to my classroom, and I don't want to be here, Mrs. Finlay, I hate art, and I said, well, why are you here? The guidance counselor made me do it because I needed the credit. And I would say, well, listen, you're here not to be an artist. You're here to learn about art and different art materials and maybe a little bit of art history. So you're not going to fail. And I am not I don't expect to have all Picassos in front of me.
Yeah.
I've got all normal people. And so we're gonna make art, you're gonna learn about art, you're gonna learn about some art theory and some art history,
Yeah.
and you'll be fine.
Absolutely.
And then they're fine.
And then they're fine.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that's so funny. That's so special. I feel like, you know, it's so intimidating sometimes to go into an art space like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
And want to be, creating the best of the best, but it's really so much more in between.
And I did think though when I got hired that I was only gonna have a full day of kids who wanted to go to art school, and that was not the case.
That was not the case.
Boy, I learned that in 5 minutes. But so what I would say to these kids as some of them were very fearful, some of them gave me attitude, and I said, well, listen, you have Mrs. So-and-so for math. Does she expect you to be a mathematician?
Right.
They go, no. And I said, how about Mrs. Whoever teaches English? Do you think you're taking English because you're going to only be a writer? And
Right.
they go, no. And I said, well, that's how it is here. You're just learning about art.
You're just learning.
Yeah, because they don't expect you to be a writer or a mathematician or a chemist.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. No, it's so true. I guess, let's see. Do you have anything that you're currently working on that you'd like to, let everyone know of, or any projects that you're,
I'm working on another Alzheimer's series, and this one is directly correlated to music. I've aligned up each note on an octave of music to the colors and the sequence of the color wheel.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And then it'll be another symbolic abstract project, and where you be able to see the music and hear the painting.
Oh my gosh, wow. So that is, and that's a collaboration.
It's a collaboration,
Yes.
Exactly. And I've got a 3-foot by 3-foot canvas, and it's grid in 12 by 12 3-inch squares. And so it's going to fit perfectly with Schoenberg's atonal music system. And I picked 6 abstracted Alzheimer's cell motifs, and they represent each sibling of my mom's family, her and her 5 siblings. And it's a collaborative, multi-generational kind of a project, because there's 144 squares that need to be drawn on this canvas that's a grid of 12 across and 12 down. So I enlisted the help of my family, so nieces and nephews and my siblings, and I have 2 aunts. One has Alzheimer's right now, and they have helped by transferring these symbols, these images onto the canvas, which I'll paint.
Oh my goodness.
And I have a nephew who he's pursuing his master's degree in musical composition, and we've talked about making a composition based on Schoenberg's music.
Oh my gosh. So we have a lot to look forward to with that project. We're so excited. Where can viewers find your work?
Well, I'm not very good at Facebook, but you can sort of kind of bring it up.
Okay,
And there is a recent project that a friend made me do, a 7-day challenge when the COVID started. So you can find 7 pieces of my work on there with a short description.
Oh, amazing. Okay, cool. So we will link to that. So I think that about covers it. Thank you so much. And we're so excited, and we'll, share that, work on our Facebook too when it comes out. So
well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.